Iron Therapy, a strength and conditioning coach's journey to mental health, wellness, and purpose. Tyler Schwartz, Compound Cowboy. Show up, work hard, learn, evolve. In this episode, I interviewed Tyler Schwartz, known as Compound Cowboy, about his career as a strength and conditioning coach and also his personal battles with mental health after the military. Tyler shared his experiences with his suicide attempt, substance abuse, and the critical role of support and communication in overcoming such obstacles. We discussed the necessity for preparedness in unexpected situations, the significance of de-escalation in self-defense, and the customized training programs and retreats offered at Tyler's compound, including specialized programs for veterans and first responders. The conversation covered the importance of controlling the controllables, the role of nutrition and supplements, the financial benefits of wellness, and the human inclination to avoid pain and seek pleasure. Tyler invites you all to connect with him for support, highlighting his dedication and purpose in helping others. During the show, Tyler also spoke about his wedding, describing it as a pivotal moment that strengthened his resolve to turn his life around. His wife became his rock, providing unwavering support through his darkest times. Together, they became a formidable team, complementing each other's strengths and fortifying one another's weaknesses. Their partnership is a testament to the power of love and teamwork in the face of adversity. Special mention goes out to former guest Ollie Ollerton, who we spoke about, acknowledging his contributions to the field and the impact he also makes on individuals facing similar struggles. Tyler and Ollie both share a common goal: to empower people to overcome their mental and physical challenges and to live their best lives. You can find Tyler on Insta at Compound Cowboy, and link is in the show notes below. Click on the hyperlink, and his website on Linktree. Again, click on that hyperlink as well. Thanks for watching. Happy New Year. I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator, subject matter expert from hownotodie.com.au. And you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by these guys, mystate.com, the ultimate daily formula for optimum hormone health, stress management, energy, and performance. 100% natural and clinically proven ingredients, it provides everything you need to raise your game in a convenient, gut-friendly capsule. Links for my former shows are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to my guest this morning, all the way from the United States, Tyler Schwartz, Compound Cowboy. Great to see you again, my friend.
Hey, great to be here. Honored.
Love the backdrop. Love our little chat there. But, we know each other before this, which is really cool. And it's great to have a friend come on a show as well. Look, I was actually running through some questions in my head in the show last night, and I thought I'd come up with, how do you become an internet sensation? Your Instagram is amazing. Your photography is cool. What are you doing right now? What's going on with you? What is Compound Cowboy all about?
Yeah, right now, I'm working as a strength and conditioning coach. I have my own gym here on the property, which I call the compound. And I just got married, as we were just discussing, right about a month ago. And my amazing wife is actually the one who takes all the content for me. So it's awesome. We have a great working relationship. She really manages, the business, our nonprofit, and I just continue to learn. One of the biggest things with me is continually learning and evolving. And that's what I try and do every single day. I try to be 1% better tomorrow than I was yesterday, and just keep moving forward. So I also have a nonprofit that we're working on doing a fundraiser for. So we're really looking forward to that. We help warriors, everything from military, law enforcement, first responders. We've had one of my buddies, John Devine, who's a former Navy SEAL out here, canine handler. And we have our next veteran lined up, Sarah, who's amazing. She's an amputee. She's an amazing, amazing human being. We met her through Rescue 22, which is another awesome nonprofit. So right now I'm also teaching a kickboxing class. I'm doing jiu-jitsu, doing a lot of different stuff. So just learning and evolving every single day.
Oh man, that's amazing. Congratulations on the newlywed status.
Thank you.
It's really interesting watching you. I found you years ago through Dom Raso, former SEAL Team 6 guy, and you were doing the strength and conditioning for some of his projects, and then of course you branched out by yourself. And I think strength and conditioning coach is a sure, it's an umbrella statement or title, but what you do is very different. And that's why I mentioned and led with the social side of things. You really portray it well. It really seems though, and I've got some background to it, that you're teaching from your own experiences. You talked about injury. You've seen some of your injuries, mental health. Then we talked about sleep as well. Do you think that served you well to teach others how not to get to some of the bad places you've been, and also how to get better than that?
Absolutely. I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes, and that's just going to happen naturally with life. And so, one of the things I teach a lot of my students is what not to do, and I tell them why not to do something. So, we want to learn why we're doing things. I'm a huge advocate of always know your why for everything that you do. But there's also reasons why you don't do certain things. And so I've made mistakes. I've dealt with, as you said, the mental health aspect. I've dealt with depression. I've dealt with anxiety. I've, even gotten to the point where I try to take my own life. And it's not, when I say those things, I'm not proud of being to those places, but I'm proud that I got through them. And I also know when I was in those places, when I was struggling, that I didn't feel like I could really talk to people about it. I just, how often are we told, when we were growing up, hey, take a knee, rub some dirt on it, drink water, don't talk about your feelings. And I felt very alone when I was going through a lot of that stuff. So one of my missions right now is to help people who are going through the same thing, who may be struggling. And the strength and conditioning aspect, I call it iron therapy. And that's where my nonprofit's coming in, because we're seeing suicide rates, we're seeing mental health at an all-time high right now. And so I'm trying to do what I can, do my part, use some of the darkness and the tough times that I've been through to help other people who may be going through it, and give them a little bit of the help that I didn't really have at that time.
Man, that's a place to jump off on. And if you're okay, I want to touch on that taking your own life side of things. Would you be okay to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason I say that, I mean, there was some positive sides to that as well, and I'm sure because you're on this side, there is some positive sides to it. I actually just saved an audio clip I'm going to use yesterday, and it was by a guy saying, I don't work out to look good. I don't work out to get strong. I work out to not throw myself off a bridge every day.
Yeah.
And then you said iron therapy, and I thought that's so cool, because it really is. But what do you think got you to the place? I'm going to talk about why that's a decision, and I'm really intrigued there. But what do you think got you to that place? Was it the injuries, the darkness? What sort of, and they call it sort of the damn wall. You're a strong guy. You've been through so many different things, and obviously resilient. But the resilience of that damn wall tends to burst after a while. And what sort of builds up for someone who we're looking at looks successful and well off and so on?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was a culmination of a lot of different things. I was drinking a lot. So, I mean, I was drinking two 175s a Maker's Mark a weekend, and then going out and having 20 to 30 drinks a night. I was
Wow.
also taking a bunch of Adderall. Like, I was prescribed it, which I didn't need it, but I mean, Adderall it's legal meth. So I was
Wow.
doing that, and I was trying to numb myself, and I was very good at hiding it. And I've actually, I went on Greg Anderson's podcast, and we, talked about some of this stuff, and it made me realize how good I was at hiding it. And like, my family, who has listened to that since then, they said it was difficult to hear, but they also uh, didn't know I was in that place. So what got me there was I was trying to numb myself. I hated myself. Uh, I was living a life where I was drinking all the time. I was being in At the time, I was very successful. I had my own business. I was actually working for a ballistic company where we were making custom ballistic products. We were doing desks We were making judges benches. We were making
Wow.
safe rooms for, I mean, like billionaires. And I was doing some cool things and designing some cool things, but I was just numb on the inside. And I actually was in the process of trying to reenlist. I tried to reenlist 4 times, and I couldn't get the medical waivers. And so I felt like a failure. I felt like at that point, that was all I wanted to do is I wanted to serve my country. I wanted
Yeah.
to, exterminate evil from this planet. I wanted to be the good guy. And I felt like a failure. And what got me to that point, going back to your question, is I didn't have anyone to talk to. And I looking back now, I had people to talk to. I wasn't strong enough to ask for help.
Yeah.
And that's what got me to that point. It was a lot of different things. It was trying to numb myself with the drugs and the alcohol. Thankfully, I have never been hooked on the painkillers, because with all the injuries I've had,
Yeah.
I would have that would have been a downfall for me. But I thankfully don't like painkillers. But
Yeah.
it was a lot of different things that just got me down a dark path. And even now, it's difficult to think about being in that place, because now I have an amazing wife. I have a business that I love. I have a nonprofit where I'm helping other people. And yeah, I mean, you want to get into it. I tried to take my own life all the way to the point of, I mean, I loaded my gun up, I put it to my head, and I pulled the trigger. And I can still hear, I can still hear that sound. It echoes every time I think about it. I have goosebumps, even though I'm in the desert in Arizona
Yeah.
right now. I have goosebumps right now. And I shouldn't be here. And I know that the only reason I'm here is by the grace of God. And so every day, that's my fuel to help as many people as possible, because I was given a second chance. And so I know the people who are going through that, I want to help them. I want them to know that you are not alone. God has something in store for you. You can help so many other people, and there is so much in this world for you. So and I'm not going to say it's been easy.
No.
I was in that darkness. I was in that dark pit. And I tell people whenever people reach out, which I'm grateful that people do reach out on my social media, I say, when you're in that darkness, when you're in that deep, dark hole, you can do one of 3 things. You can dig the hole deeper and make it harder to climb out of. You can sit there, or you can start climbing.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
it's not going to be easy, but yeah, that's a basic overview.
I love the military analogy about a guy stuck down a hole, a soldier stuck down a hole, and all these people walk past and they all say different things. Like the priest that walks past says, "I'm going to pray for you," and somebody else says something else. But then another army guy who goes past, he jumps in. He jumps in with
Yeah.
them, and I thought that's cool. And you and I connected um, properly. I think it's the first time we sort of met via video, and we really worked with the sleep side of things. Um, I really think it's only my opinion. It does come from a few pretty clever scientists, information that biology creates psychology. And I was watching Lane Norton the other day, another scientist, saying that one of the major issues for injury, the major ways to prevent injury is sleep. And that makes sense. It's when you repair and grow. But things like the alcohol you're drinking and the Adderall you're taking, and then combine that with lack of sleep, that's a mass amount of biology will create X amount of psychology. Then throw on top of that the other things that you had. It's a bit of a perfect storm. And some things we can um, control. You can control what time you go to bed. I'm not saying you can control what time you go to sleep, but at least you control that, and you can start to gain some of that control back to control the biology, and that might help the psychology. Look, Tyler, I want to say you're not alone. I interviewed Tom Satterley, and he's blowing up right now. Tom Satterley, Black Hawk Down, All Secure Foundation, former Delta Force guy, and he's blowing up all of the internet right now with the Sean Ryan show, and particularly because of the Black Hawk Down 30th anniversary, I think 36 hours ago. And when I interviewed him, I didn't know this stuff. Um, his, I'm not going to say claim to fame, but his part of his story was, he was sitting in a hotel room, in a car, I think, with his 45 in his mouth, and he got a text message from his now wife, same as you, and now beautiful partner, who wasn't in a relationship at the time, and that text message saved his life. You know, for you, it was a dud round, a click, or whatever it was, frying pan. For him, it was that text message popped up while the gun was in his, I'm going to swear, in his fucking mouth. You know, it's you're not alone, and listen to this. Neither are you weak guys. You know, that guy's gone through so much. I've seen what you're doing. You're very strong. So my question with that preempt is, why do you think that males, and I say males because more males commit suicide, but more females try, and I know exactly why this is. Why do you think males see that as the solution?
It's a good question. And it's difficult to speak for other people. For
Mm,
me, I'll speak to myself. I felt like the world would be a better place without me. And that goes back to the
yeah,
self-hatred.
yeah.
Like I truly hated myself. And so I'm not going to speak to other people, but I felt like the world would be a better place without me. And the only person at that time who I didn't feel like that with would have been my mom. And
Wow.
actually, when I go back to that point, and I loaded my pistol up and put it to my head, I pictured my mom's face, and I said, "I'm sorry."
Mm.
And that's so to answer your question, I think I just hated myself, and I thought the world would be a better place without me. I was, yeah.
Wow. Man, I had no idea we were going this way with the show. And to be honest, I'd forgotten that part of our conversation almost a year ago, which I apologize for that because it's so powerful. But and, I'm definitely going to talk down the success side. Um, you know, that part you said about not talking, when I preempted that, a lot of females try to commit suicide, but they're not aggressive enough. Not as many males attempt suicide, but when they do, they sure as hell are aggressive. You're aggressive enough to pull the trigger. But it comes back to talking. There's two ways that males and females. I'm not going to go down the gender side because it's a female brain and a male brain. They deal with stress a different way. So a stress. So let's say um, they've got a problem with their work. This guy they don't like at work. The girls will come together and they'll talk and talk and talk. They'll have coffee or wine and they'll talk all about it and talk all the nuances. They're amazing at it. Great talkers. At the end of the thing, no action. Guys, all action, no talk. Hey, Tyler, don't like this guy. Well, punch him out. Action, no talk. Neither of them, according to Jordan Peterson, are complete solutions to dealing with the problem, the stress. What you need is all the talk and then some action. You need a good combination. And it's interesting, coming off what you said, you didn't feel like you're strong enough to talk to someone. And then you were saying you didn't feel that self-worth, but I'm sure that, as you actually stated, your family, when they heard you on that podcast, were like, "Oh, I didn't really know," but I'm sure they would have wanted to speak to you and disavow you of that notion, that incorrect self-belief. So it's really interesting hearing the background to that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And they've even said that, and I had to let them know it was okay, and I was really good at hiding it. Um, they've said that they felt bad that I didn't feel like I could talk to them. And I was like, I was
Mm,
so good at hiding it. I mean, and it took me. It's not like that happened, and I told people about it right away. Especially with that, it took me a long time to get out of that place,
yeah,
but I even I even failed at trying to take my own life. If so for a while I was thinking about that, and I'm so grateful that that happened. I don't mean for that to sound any way other than thank you God for not letting that round go off.
yeah,
But it took a long time, and I mean it was years until I talked about it publicly. I talk privately about people who were struggling, but then I got to the point where I'm like, I need to help people because this is such an issue today, and not talking about it's not going to help.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Wow. Now that thank you, because that was my last point to sort of tie this in a bow. Men, if you're listening here, and ladies, but men tend to talk to men, but ladies, Jen sadly literally saved Tom's life with that text message. Um, if Here's an example from me. I was talking to one of my special forces buddies online on Messenger. He's in New Zealand and I'm over here in Australia. I'm messaging him and it's a quick interaction. And I'm like, hey man, if you ever need anything, just reach out. And I had this light bulb moment again. I went, fuck, this guy is reaching out right now. Stop. Okay. I said to him, I'm so sorry. I won't say his name. I'm so sorry. And I started, talking much more. That brings me to Rick Hogg, another Delta Force guy, runs warhog.com. Please, someone check that site out because it's shadow banned to hell. And when he talks to his buddies, if I say, hey, how you going, Tyler? And he says, yep, good. That's the biggest red flag. Good. No way. He just dives on, and literally, he's a tiny guy. He dives on in and tries to pull that guy back. But yeah, what I'm trying to get at, men, if you're listening, if you've got the chance to speak to someone, make that important. And I say that with you, Tyler, because you and I started talking about sleep, and there was a couple of things that kicked off there, and I gave you my full attention. I had kids running around, breakfast going on, everybody get away. I need to talk to this guy and let's make this happen. We hadn't really known each other. So yeah, that's important, isn't it? If you hear something or you make contact with a guy that's a friend and something feels a bit off, just dig in.
Absolutely. And, just piggybacking off your point there, I will ask people, how are you doing really? And because so often we're like, hey, how are you? And it's just kind of like something you say in the morning or like good
Mm,
morning. It's like, no, we need to be like, how are you really? How's your family? How's your wife? How is everything going? Are you sleeping okay? And we need to ask those hard questions. A lot of times we don't because we're afraid of the answer. And we need to get that fear out of here and just actually ask the hard questions because that's when we get to real solutions.
I love that. Now, real solutions. You're here and you did an amazing thing a few months ago, just from being you. I remember I think you said you just got back from a jujitsu class. You're in your jandals or flip flops, you call them, and there was an emergency situation, what looked like an emergency situation, where you had to grab your body armor and gun. That really struck a chord in me with obviously How Not to Die. Could you talk us through that? And then I'm going to ask you some other questions off the back of it. What actually happened?
Yeah. So I was getting back. I just pulled into our property, and my at the time fiance, now wife, was working out in our gym. And so I pulled in and said hi to her. And then as I was going to go into our home and shower up and get on with the rest of my day, I heard these cries for help, and they were screeching, terrified cries for help. And I stopped and I was kind of looking around and I was like, okay, that's not normal. So I heard them a couple more times, and I was only a couple feet away from where our gym is. And so I told told my wife, I was like, hey, we have a situation here. Like, hang on. So I grabbed my kit, grabbed weapon system, and I'm in fight shorts. So that day was no gi jujitsu. So I had my fight shorts on. I was wearing flip flops. It was, I believe, 116 degrees in the middle of the summer in Arizona.
Okay.
Like, we had hard rolls. My last roll of the day was a 10-minute roll with someone who is an absolute savage. And so I grab everything, grab my kit, grab my gun, and by this time, I tell my now wife that, hey, call 911 because the screams were still coming. So I started running towards the screams, running towards the cries for help. And then they disappeared when I got closer.
Yep.
And we live in the middle of the desert. and it's very remote. It's an area where uh, you don't know a lot of your neighbors. I've met one of my neighbors, and that's because and it's not a good thing. But I've met one of my neighbors, and that's because we ended up doing some work together, and they provide a service to my business.
Yep.
And I get to this cul-de-sac where I believe the screams are coming from, and like I said, they were gone. And I can see a garage door that's partially open,
Yep.
and so I kind of get behind some cover. There was at the end of that driveway, there were uh, a couple of those big brick pylons that have mailboxes in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like that. So I get behind there because you know, wanted a little bit of cover. I have no idea what I'm dealing with, especially there's so much human trafficking, especially with children these days. And it sounded
Wow.
like, to my ears, it sounded like a teenage girl.
Yep.
And so I get behind there, and right before I started running, I had Megan, my wife, called 911, and I'm kind of posting up, seeing if I can see anything, hear anything, because as you don't rush to your death.
Yep.
So I'm looking, I'm listening, and I can't hear anything. So the law enforcement ends up showing up, and I kind of track back to where they're at, end up finding out the situation, telling them what's going on, and the situation ended up being okay. But my point with that post, so what happened was nothing heroic, it was nothing miraculous, but with that post, I wanted people to understand that I just got done with an extensive training session. I was in my sandals, and I reacted. So I had my equipment ready. I was prepared, even though it was 116 degrees out. I just got done with a hard workout, literally still in my sweaty workout clothes.
Mm.
I was ready to, take action if need be. And what ended up happening was these kids were trying to build a skate ramp, and one of the kids went inside, the other one was trying to build the skate ramp, everything collapsed on top of them. And
Oh.
so that kid was yelling for his brother,
Yep.
and he was a younger kid. So I hear these screeches. I think in my head, worst case scenario, I think it's a teenage girl who maybe they had some sort of, some sort of cell or something, and she got out and she's
Yep.
yelling for help now.
Yep.
And so, yeah, my point with that was always be prepared and always be ready to help people. So it didn't have some cool ending or anything like that. I mean, I guess it is a cool ending
I
because no
think
one
it
was
is.
being
I think
hurt.
it is, man. That's as cool as it
Yeah.
gets. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
that was the end of that story.
that's really good, man. You got to be prepared for worst case. So I've talked about this with the How Not to Die in-person courses, and one of my training partners is like 13 years SWAT veteran, shot a whole bunch of bad guys, and we say it's easier to step down, but you can't step up. So you're going in there body armor gun, and you could if you had to drop that down and do first aid. Now,
Mhm.
I carry a full trauma kit in my car, and there'll be some things, a pen is not a weapon, but obviously it can be. It's not a gun or anything, but I've pulled that trauma kit out 10 times in the years I've been here, and I've never pulled out any weapon. And for the police listening, there's no weapons in my car. It's things you can use. A mag light torch is a nice, long, heavy torch. I've never pulled those out, but it's easier to step down than it is to step up. So be prepared. I talk about having boots by your bed. I learned that because when we're in East Timor on a mission, we would be at a fire base, and one guy outside, I won't go into it too much because I don't want to steal your thunder, but he set himself on fire by mistake, and when people are on fire, they run. It's just what humans do. They're trying to run away from it. And our guys bolt out of the rooms, these shacks, at 4 a.m. in bare feet over sharp rocks. They were cut up to save this guy's life. And from that day on, boots are beside my bed. In the special forces, we sleep with our boots on. Where you have one boot off and one boot on, one foot on the ground when you're taking care of your feet. but you got to be prepared. So I totally agree with you. I loved that you had your armor there and you get and you managed to get out. It did remind me though, responding. So many people would have discounted that cry for help. I'm going to share one story that happened to me well before I was a soldier. I didn't know any of these things, and I sort of did what you did, possibly run to my death. So a night out, say Friday night, been drunk, and I'm walking home, and I hear this cry, I hear this scream, and it's when you hear those screams, just like you did, you know it's off, right? And so I look over and I see it's like a three-story apartment complex, open complex. I go running in. I go, first aid. That's all I've been trained in. Hello, hello, can you hear me? What you're supposed to do. And I couldn't find anything. It was the strangest thing. And I rang the police. And in New Zealand, it's easy to get police, and it's a really small place. Here's what happened. This is wild. Um, we didn't find out. I found out the next day from the detectives. Police came up. They were knocking doors. They had the dog out, trying to track and so on. What had happened was a female had been going on the second floor balcony that's got a like a concrete wall around it, so a cover or concealment, and she'd gone to go into her house, open the lock on her door and push the door in open, and some guy had followed her, and he'd grabbed her to sexually assault her. He heard me come running, screaming, "Hello, can you hear me?" He knocked her clean out. She dropped below the wall, so none of us could find her or see her, and he ran. So you
Wow.
never know what happens. You found out later, skateboard ramp collapsed. It's better to have someone there and not need them than it is to not have someone there. So I love that you reacted. I love that you're a great example for that, and it's what good people should do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story. And that's what would haunt me would be if I didn't react. And I mean, I could still hear that kid screaming. And if I didn't know that he was okay,
Yeah,
that for me, I I can't even imagine being that person. I know that's how the majority of people are. I see, as you do, all these videos of people in New York. Someone goes up and just starts beating on someone, knocks them out, steals, and people are just watching.
yeah.
I know that's the majority, but I will never be that person. I do not care what happens to me, but I will not let someone have that happen to them if there's something I can do about it
Yeah.
ever. Like
I
that. Yeah.
But people like us, and I don't blame anybody. I mean, I wrote an article for SoftRep on this. I don't blame anyone at all for freezing. And I did it on the French playground stabbing. That's normal. They are normal, Tyler, because we are not.
Yep.
We turn
Yep.
towards gunfire. We've been brainwashed to do that. And I say that word because the other word is training, and we're trained to be responders. But I don't blame them. But now, after seeing that in a playground, now you must take action that this could happen. So you've got to take some sort of action. And actually, look, seriously, that thing that happened to me was about 30 years ago. I remember now what's spurred me is I actually saw a guy running away. So it's a really weird situation. It's like a scream, then nothing, then a guy running. What are you supposed to do? You're supposed to chase this guy? What are you going to do? But just if you see something, say something. If you can go and take action, all those things put you forwards on the right track and may help others as well. And even in first aid situations, someone says, no, no, I'm fine. And then they drop, that we're taught that all the time. So it's really important for people like us to pass on that knowledge and experience, and it may empower others.
Well, and you said something important. You mentioned freeze, and
Yes.
a lot of people think everyone mentions fight or flight, but
Mm,
there's more than two options, as you know. So there's
mm,
fight or flight, but there's freeze,
yep.
there's submit, and there's
Fawns,
posture.
fawns submit.
Yep.
So many females, they
Hmm.
start smiling when they're freaking out and they fawn, and that's normal as well.
Yep. Exactly. I actually use the example of the Florida airport shooting that happened a couple of years back. I'll use that in my courses when I'm teaching, either situational awareness, any of my classes. I like using that because I mentioned it's not just fight or flight. And in the video that I use, every one of those five happened. There's people
Wow.
who are fleeing. There's people who are submitting. They literally lay down. There's people who actually the only one that I don't see is posturing. And posturing would be like if someone bumps into you and you're like, oh, you got a problem.
Yeah.
But other than that, every single one of those is in that video. And it's something I talk about so frequently because it's not just fight or flight. There are people literally who just lay down in place
Wow.
and they submit. There are people who don't move and their rounds going off right around them and they just freeze, which
Yep.
is a natural reaction if you're not trained if you're not a trained person. But the goal is to always be trained. And as you said earlier, we never want to have to use these things. It's just like I have a fire extinguisher in my kitchen. I have fire extinguishers all throughout my house. I never want to have to use that.
No.
But I feel very confident knowing that it's there if I have to.
Exactly. Gosh, funny you mentioned that airport shooting. I think a friend of mine, Eric Davis, former Navy SEAL, and he wrote an amazing book uh, about becoming a man, transitioning from a child to a man. He was actually in the airport, from what I remember. So you got a highly trained Navy SEAL, combat veteran, and he, I think he had a gun on him as well. So he was carrying legally, and he got behind cover slash concealment. And he quickly realized, assessing the situation, if he pulls a gun, someone's going to shoot him and it's going to be a good guy because nobody knew what was going on. Like you said, people were lying down. But what a cool thing for him to be able to do is assess the situation, not um, freeze, not fight. He make a decision, a conscious decision not to fight, and it kept him safe because that's the first thing is protect yourself. So that was really interesting that you brought that example up, and I think I know a guy that was actually in it.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy. And it's always funny when you have these situations and people are like, "Oh, I would have done that." It's like you have no idea context. And I mean, doing scenario-based training, the first thing that I always ask if I'm doing it as a student is what's the context? How many people? And not knowing that, am I with my family? Am I by myself? Am I with my wife? Is my dog who's my service dog there? So all of these things are going to be factors that are going to change how you're going to act and react based on that. And so it's always funny when you hear people like, "Oh, I would have done this." It's like you have no idea. You have no idea, and unless you were there, it's hard for you to talk about a certain situation. I mean, you can learn from it,
Yeah,
absolutely, but to criticize people in certain situations when you don't know all of the factors, especially with memory and as you know probably better than I do, how memory can be shifted based on context and time and all of that sort of stuff. The human
yeah.
brain is a pretty crazy thing.
Wow, that's amazing you brought up context. Really is, because just 36 hours ago, I interviewed Todd Fox from tourprotection.com. I organically get to know a guest on a show, and I do a little bit of research because I don't want to get too preemptive. Turns out he's a really big deal, and provides massive amount of close protection and bigger than that for a lot of music tours, government agencies, and other things. But he's like a black belt in these things and in jujitsu, and he's had to write books on this. He was a SWAT guy, a law enforcement guy, and a Marine before that, and his book is essentially context. Jujitsu, or this move, this tool could be right for this, but not for this, and it's all contextual. Which brings me to you. You've just come. You said you're a jujitsu. You mentioned God and many times, and you mentioned your family, but you teach to how to stab guys in the face. you, you know,
Yes.
how, and it comes back to us being able to step down. Could you explain to the listeners, you know, context, using tools rather than some guy saying jujitsu is everything you should use as a police officer? Well, you're probably going to get shot or stabbed. Um, you know, how do you use all your training experience? versus this is just one good thing, like jiu-jitsu is the best combat thing to use?
Yeah, well, I guess the first thing I would say is that everything I do, you mentioned stabbing the guy in the face. Everything I do is to protect what is behind me and besides for me. My brothers
Yep.
besides me, and my family behind me. I
Right.
never want to have to use these violence, which is
Thank you.
what separates good versus evil. Evil, they want to just destroy. I want to protect. So if I never have to get another fight for my life, I will be grateful for that.
Mm.
But if I get to the point where I have to, if someone threatens my family, if someone threatens innocent bystanders, wherever I am, I know how to protect myself and I know how to protect them. And
Yeah.
so, like you mentioned, yes, I do jiu-jitsu, and I loved one of your posts where it was talking about jiu-jitsu guys when someone breaks into their home, and it was the guy, it was Charles Oliveira laying on his back, like, waiting for him to come into their guard. And I commented, I was like, I love jiu-jitsu, but if someone comes into my home, I am grabbing my weapons.
Yeah.
And so knowing the right tools for the right job, just like if I have a nail, I'm going to use a hammer, and I'm not going to use a screwdriver. So knowing the right tools for the right job is very important. And I have used jujitsu in the street. I've used it in street fights. I've choked people unconscious. And it goes to the escalation of force. So
Mm.
if I'm in a little bit of a scuffle, let's say I had a couple of drinks, and it just happens, especially when you're a younger, dumber person. I was, in my dark times, and with some other buddies who that used to be what we do. We'd have some drinks, and maybe getting a little bit of a scuffle, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to use lethal force for that. But I always know that you can escalate that force, but I would rather de-escalate that force. That's one of the things that Dom and I, when we train together, we talk about. I would rather have someone who you have to pull back
Yep.
than, because it's hard to teach people certain things. And even when I teach my blade courses, one of the first things I talk about is, can you use your blade? Can you actually? Because it takes a special person to stick a blade into another human being. You don't have this distance. It's very close, it's very personal. And so you have to
It's probably the
actually
last
picture
thing
that
you
and ask
woke up to
yourself.
thinking about doing as well. Bad guys have some kind of pre-plan. As you said, they just want to destroy, but we're normal people having bad things happen to us. We still don't want to do those things to people.
Yep, exactly. And I also mentioned, if someone attacks me, I'm not going to be the victim. Right when they attack me, it's their bad day. I'm going on the offensive, and it is going to be their bad day. So I'm not going to be the victim. We have a victim mentality. Uh, I'm just here, live my life. I will be peaceful. I'll smile at everyone. I'll wave, and
Yeah.
hey, how you doing? But if a bad guy comes in and he wants to disrupt the peace, he wants to bring violence and evil, he will be met with more than he can handle.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. That my sergeant major, my squadron sergeant major used to have a sign on his door: "Be friendly, be polite, but have a plan to kill everyone you meet."
Yep. Yep. One of my favorite quotes. I love that. I love that.
So you really teach a whole bunch of stuff, and I found you, as I said, with Dom Rasso, you were strength and conditioning sort of asset for that. Um, but you really, with your strength and conditioning videos you've got on Instagram and so on, really high end things, plus your rehab coming back from there, it's brilliant. So you're someone that wants to find out more about you. I'm not doing the Instagram stuff now, but just find out more about you. They're looking at strength and conditioning, maybe looking at rehab, maybe looking at lifestyle fitness or functional fitness. Could you just sort of outline what you do at the compound?
Yeah. So I do a wide variety of things. The main thing I do at the compound, weekly, is one-on-one in-person training sessions with my clients.
Yep.
So that's how I really like to work, at least here at the compound, is just one-on-one. Um, we get to engage, we get to talk. I know all of my clients, I know about their families, I know, oh, you're moving. And so and one of the biggest things I'll mention is the difference of a strength and conditioning coach versus a personal trainer.
Mm,
A personal trainer, and I've worked as a personal trainer before in a bigger gym. A lot of times they are less experienced, but they also kind of have a like one workout they'll plug all of their clients into throughout that day. They might
yep.
change the rep scheme based on what they're doing. But as a coach, we're part of a team. And that's what I tell every one of my clients. When you come here and you come to the compound, it's your gym. Like anything you want to work on. And obviously, we're going to work on things that you're not going to want to work on because we
Yep.
got to get you in the best shape possible. But that's what we're doing. And it's dependent 100% based on that client. If they want to learn self defense, I have a combatives area to do that. If they want to learn blade work, I have an area to do that. If they want to learn pistol work, I have UTM, non lethal training ammunition. I have all of the protective gear where I can suit up, I can be a bad guy. Whatever they want to work on, we have the capabilities to do here. And then with our nonprofit, we also have a trailer right here. It's a 27-foot Airstream. It's like a beautiful apartment. And we have veterans, we have military, we have law enforcement, first responders come out here. They stay with us for a week,
Wow.
and I do my in-person physical assessment, and we work through that. We'll train together, we'll eat together. Everything is 100% covered under our nonprofit. So all the food, we make that. Megan and I make that. We have all of our supplements provided by BPN. And after that week, when they go home, they get 6 months of custom programming from me. So on their app, 100% custom programming based on what sort of injuries they have. And that's one of the biggest things because no two people are really alike, no matter if they're dealing with mental health. Like I said and mentioned, our next warrior who's coming out, Sarah, she has her right leg is amputated. So
Wow.
dealing with the specific challenges there, because once a lot of people don't know, once an amputee starts working out, you have a limited amount of time because you start sweating, and that prosthetic leg starts developing sweat underneath it, and it
Yeah.
starts the salt and the sodium from that starts rubbing. And friction wise, you only have so much time that you can really work so hard on that leg doing specific workouts. So knowing that sort of stuff and then providing specific workouts based on who you are, what you want
Yep.
to achieve, and then the mental aspect. I mean, I've preached on that a couple of times today, but the always forging forward, and it's truly iron therapy because
Yeah.
that's I truly believe that saved me working out.
Well, let's go back to something I touched on there. And it was a quote from Ollie Ollerton. I didn't explain it. Ollie Ollerton, former SBS guest on the show and a great guy. He talks about controlling the controllables. I said you could control what time you go to bed. Controlling the controllables, everything feels out of control. I use a quote: "A man without purpose is lost," and you found your purpose. You didn't state it as sort of paraphrasing. You didn't really have a purpose because you're trying to re-enlist and it wasn't going on. And obviously things are a bit awry, but controlling the controllables, and one of those things is lifting. Like I can choose to go to my back door into my gym there and start to do something. You can choose to start walking, which I've done with my son in the mornings before breakfast. You can control the controllables, and that is such a powerful thing for mental health. Like, hey, this isn't all chaos, and iron therapy is one of them. And yeah, I think it's a brilliant way to get started because that's a stepping stone. I think you mentioned that in a different way of saying it. It's a stepping stone to the next one and the next one.
I love that, and I say it in a different way, but I love control the controllables. I always say focus on what you can control, but control the controllables is put much better than I have put it, and it's true. And real number one to forging the best version of yourself, I always tell people show up because you can't get better if you don't show up. And so I have these four things that I tell every one of my clients, I tell my followers, and I'll just go over them. Rule number one is show
Yeah.
up.
Yep.
Two, work hard, because it doesn't matter if you show up and you just sit on your butt all day. I mean, how many people? I'm grateful that I have my own gym where I get to work out, and it's just either me and my wife are in there working out. But when I
Yep.
was working out at public gyms, I would see so often people just go and they sit on a bench and they'll do one set every 15 minutes. And like, they don't really do much. So they show up, but they don't work hard. So
Yep.
show up, work hard, learn is number
Yep.
3. And then evolve is number 4, because after you learn, you have to take what you've learned and turn it into evolution of you being that best version of yourself. So it's a constant process. It's almost like the OODA loop, where it's like show up, work hard, learn, evolve every single day, all 4 of those.
Yeah, eat, sleep, lift, repeat, or whatever
Exactly.
those people out there say. The young kids out there are saying nowadays.
Yeah,
Gosh, I'm
exactly.
old. I'm old now, mate. Um,
I hear
that's part of why, part of the actual angle I was looking for today. You know, the learn and evolve, you and work hard. Your videos, as I said, you know, I sort of lead with how do you become an Instagram sensation. Your videos and your exercises are unique. They're groundbreaking. They're clever, and you work hard at them, and you show that. Also, you show not the best side of you, which is great. I did the same thing myself yesterday. But where did you learn all this stuff? I mean, it's very different than back in my day.
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate that. I guess it first started. Uh, I went out to Florida, and I met with Phil DeRue, who's one of my friends and mentor. He's a strength and conditioning coach. He is the strength and conditioning coach of Dustin Poirier. He's worked
Oh,
with
wow.
yeah, I mean, he works with Timbaland right now. He works with some very, very impressive athletes, a lot of professional fighters.
Hmm.
But I actually went out to Florida in December. I believe it's coming up on 2 or 3 years ago. I'd have to look at the dates, you know, how they all mesh together. But I went to a coaching conference and I met Phil, and part of what he was teaching was on social media. And funny enough, one of the things he told me, he's like, dude, you got to take your shirt off. And I was like, dude, I don't want to take my shirt off. I feel like such a douche doing that. He's like, no, it shows people that you know what you're doing. Because if you
Yeah.
can train yourself and they see that you're in shape. But then he kind of gave me a little bit of the rundown of you have to find your niche. You have to
Yeah.
find out what's uniquely you. And just gave me some bullet points. And so that was kind of the start of that, because right when I went out there, I had 3,000 followers.
Wow.
And so everything after that, within the next year, shot up. I believe uh, I had 3,000 at that point, and then a year from that point, I had in the 20,000s or something like that. So it grew a lot in a year,
Yeah.
but it was a lot of trial and error. And one of the biggest things I do now is I'm not searching for likes. Obviously, likes are good,
Mm,
because as a business owner, that's how I promote my business
mm,
is social media. But my number one thing that I need every single one of my posts to have is a meaning. I need to feel good about giving some sort of information, some sort of purpose, that if I were watching that, what could I take away?
mm.
And it's not just about looking cool. I mean, yesterday I posted a video where I talked about how so many people only post their highlight reels. And then I
Yes.
showed my back pain. I showed my procedures I've gone through. I've gone through 18 back procedures. I've shown the pain. And that's really what has made me who I am, is being
Yeah.
able to go through those and come out on the other side and be stronger, because that's what forging is. I always talk about forging the best version of yourself. Well, when you forge, it's a hot, uncomfortable process. Sparks fly. You're hammering steel on steel, and iron sharpens iron. So uh, yeah, that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I just continue to learn, and I don't do things solely for likes. I do them because I want to help people.
Yeah.
And behind every one of my posts is how can this help people? What sort of information can they get from it?
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes I'll have gaps of not posting, because and I have probably 15 reels that I've already made. And I'm like, I don't feel good about that. I want to put out good content. I don't just want to put something out because, oh, I got to post something today. I want to, whenever I put something out, I want it to help somebody.
It's got to have purpose. I agree. And look, you just made me realize why people like this, why the people who like this show, and it's because it's authentic. I'll talk to Pat Mack, uh, and we're not talking about gunfights. We're talking about some authentic stuff he's been through in a different way. Um, Authenticity is super important. I think about 2 or 3 months ago, I'd written that article on. I wrote an article on a shooting in Auckland, a active shooter, but he was actually a domestic violence perpetrator before that, convicted, not alleged, like you're going to hear in places. And straight away after I talked about that, I had a guy message me say, "Thank you so much," because I talked about men's domestic violence perpetrated on men. And he messaged me saying, "Look, I've just got off the phone with a friend of mine who is a victim. Thank you for saying that." Now that's what counts. Um, what's interesting though is not everybody's going to see that post that follows you. So it's a little bit, for me, it seems inauthentic. I always want to put something out. This is what I'm doing now, but it may be. I'm thinking as I'm talking, clever to sort of rerun those things because we want everybody to see it. Because if one person that needs to see it didn't, you sort of haven't done the job. But the authenticity is key. I interviewed a woman, young woman, Josie Bullman, just a female here in Australia. No big deal, never been on a show, and she's a strength and conditioning coach here, and she's as authentic as it gets. Former eating disorder, former high-end basketballer, had to diet tons, and now she's showing the other side, the success coming out of body dysmorphia and eating disorder. And authenticity is key, and it is about helping people. And people resonate towards that. So I'm suggesting that's how you've become so popular as well. It's key. I just want to touch on something you said there, nutrition. You mentioned, is it BPM supplements?
Yes, yeah, BPN supplements. That's what that's one of my partners, one of my sponsors who I've been with for, I think, just over a year now.
And the reason I touch on that is, hopefully for people listening, very powerful. You can control what time you go to bed. Like I said, you can't control what time you go to sleep, but we'll figure that out. You can control showing up to the gym. How often, Tyler, do you not feel like working out, but you just put your shoes on?
90% of the time. I mean, especially now with it being my job,
Yeah,
there there's I love going to jiu-jitsu. That's my like free time because I don't
yeah.
have to coach, but strength and conditioning sessions, probably 90% of the time I don't want to do it.
That,
I mean, that's just being honest.
that's honest. It's real, because your gym has another purpose. My back gym, the other half is behind the camera, is a washing line, all this other stuff, you know. But I have a process. If I just put my shoes on, or if I just do this thing, it gets you started, doesn't it? It's just showing up.
Absolutely.
So we control what time we go to bed. We control showing up for exercise, just getting out the door to walk, whatever it is. But, and this is powerful. Gosh, I'm trying to sell this like selling iced Eskimos. You control what you put in your mouth. That's a fact. Unless you even do it in jail, unless you're being force fed, you control what you put in your mouth. So I wanted to really iterate that point and then give you the freedom to speak about nutrition and possibly the supplement, which I didn't know. Possibly talk about nutrition there with your clients, because nutrition was the other huge part that Lane Norton said. Sleep is a massive injury prevention, but so is nutrition.
Absolutely. And nutrition, what you're putting in your body, that's fuel. I mean, think of your body as a vehicle. If you have a Ferrari and you put crappy gas in it and crappy oil, it's not going to run at optimal levels. And the battle, I tell every one of my clients who are struggling with nutrition, the battle starts at the grocery store. And if you
Yes, that's
walk around the
amazing.
grocery store, I mean, walk around the grocery store, look at people who are very in shape and very out of shape, and look at what is in their shopping cart. And usually it lines up. Usually people who are out of shape have cases and cases of soda. They have a bunch of bread. They have a bunch of processed food. They have sugar. They have all of these things. Like, no matter what, like those people are working for it. Unless you have some sort of rare condition, or if you have, you know, some medical condition, people who are very out of shape, it's taken a while to get there. Just like people who are very in shape, it's taken a lot to get to that point. And your fuel, your nutrition that you're putting into your body is so important. If you're not fueling properly, you're not going to be able to perform properly. And that's why, I use BPN supplements. That's my company that, I send a lot of my clients to. They also do third party testing. So they test every single batch of their product to make sure, because a lot of my clients, like I've mentioned, are military, law enforcement, or they're professional athletes. And so they can't be popping for some negative supplement or something that they're not supposed to take,
Well,
which,
can I
oh,
pause? Not
yep.
tangent off. Pause on that. I interviewed a UFC athlete, and he was taking a supplement. I can say it because it is Gaspari. He said it rhymes with Aspari. He was taking a supplement called Anavite. It's a vitamin and mineral. He tested positive for steroids from it. They tracked it back. So what you're saying is not, let's not blow that off, people that are listening and watching. That's some important stuff. This guy was banned. It was going to be a 2-year ban for him, his livelihood, and went down to 3 months because it was proven that Gaspari had that in it, and they put that on a banned list. But that's important,
Yeah,
Tyler.
exactly. I mean, whether you're a professional athlete and you want to make sure that you're not popping for a banned substance, or even think about if you're a